Hello. I was gonna read some more from the Native American myth and legends. So this story is the flood, Tlingit. Long, long ago, in the days of the animal people, Raven at the head of Nas became angry. He said, "Let rain pour down all over the world. Let people die of starvation." At once it became so stormy people could not get food, so they began to starve. Their canoes were also broken up, their houses fell in upon them, and they suffered very much. Then Naskakia, Raven at the head of Nas, asked for his jointed dance hat. When he put it on, water began pouring out of the top of it. It is from Raven that the Indians obtain this kind of hat. When the water rose to the house floor, Raven and his mother climbed upon the lowest retaining timber. This house we are speaking of, although it looked like a house to them, was really part of the world. It had 8 rows of retaining timbers. When Raven and his mother climbed to a higher timber, the people of the world were climbing into the hills. Then Raven and his mother climbed to the 4th timber. By that time the water was halfway up the mountains. When the house was nearly full of water, Raven's mother got into the skin of a cax. To this very day, Tlingits do not eat the cax, because it was Raven's mother. Then Raven got into the skin of a white bird with a copper-colored bill. Now the cax is a diver, and stayed upon the surface of the water. But Raven flew to the very highest cloud and hung there by his bill, but his tail was in the water. After Raven had hung in the cloud for days and days, nobody knows how long, he pulled his bill out and prayed to fall on a piece of kelp. He thought that the water had gone down. When Raven fell upon the kelp and flew away, he found that the water is just halfway down the mountains. Raven flew around until he met a shark, which had been swimming around with a long stick. Raven took the stick and climbed down it as a ladder to the bottom of the ocean, but Raven had sent Eagle to watch his tide. Raven wandered around the bottom of the ocean until he came to an old woman. He said to her, "How cold I am after eating these sea urchins." He repeated this over and over again. At last the woman said, "What low tide is this Raven talking about?" Raven did not answer. The woman kept repeating, "What low tide are you talking about?" Then Raven became angry. He said, "I will stick these sea urchins into you if you don't keep quiet." At last he did so. Then the woman began singing, "Don't, Raven, the tide will go down if you don't stop." But the water was receding, as Raven had told it to, in his magic words. Raven asked Eagle who was watching the tide. "How far down is the tide now?" "The tide is as far down as half a man." "How far down is the tide?" he asked again. "The tide is very low," said Eagle. Then the old woman started her magic song again. Raven said, "Let it get dry all around the world." After a while, Eagle said, "The tide is very low now. You can hardly see any water." Raven said, "Let it still get drier." At last, everything was dry. This is the lowest tide there ever was. All the salmon and whales and seals lay on the sands because the water was so low. Then the people killed them for food. They had enough food to last them a long time. When the tide began to rise again, the people were frightened. They feared there would be another flood, so they carried their food back a long distance. Afterward, Raven returned to Nas River and found that people there had not changed their ways. They were dancing and feasting. They asked Raven to join them. I'll read 2 stories. So there's also how Raven stole the lake. Haida. After Raven had made the crows black because they had eaten his salmon, crows had always been white before that. They say he met some people with feathers on their heads and gambling stick bags on their backs. They said, "What is the matter?" Raven said, "Oh, my father and mother are dead." They then started home with him. These were the beavers, they say. They were going out to gamble, but turned back on account of him. The next morning they put their gambling stick bags upon their backs and started off again. Raven flew around behind a screen. Lo, a lake lay there. In a creek flowing from it was a fish trap. The fish trap was so full of salmon, it looked as if someone were shaking it. There were plenty of salmon in it, and in the lake were small canoes passing each other. Several points of land were red with cranberries. Raven pulled out the fish trap, folded it together, and laid it down at the edge of the lake. Then he rolled it up with the lake and house, put them under his arm, and pulled himself up into a tree that stood close by. They were not heavy for his arm. He had rolled the lake up just as though it were a blanket. Raven sat in the tree halfway up. After a while, someone came. His lake and house were not there. After he had looked about for some time, he looked up. Lo, there sat Raven with their property. Then the beavers were quickly to that tree. They began cutting it with their teeth. When it began to fall, Raven went to another one. When that began to fall, he went to another. After the beavers had cut down many trees in this way, they gave it up. They then traveled about for a long time, they say. After a long time, they had found a lake and settled down on it. Then, after Raven had traveled around for a while with the lake, he came to a large open place. He unrolled the lake there. There it lay. He did not let the fish trap or the house go. He kept them to teach the seaward Manload people and the shoreward Queen Charlotte Islands people, they say. Maybe a third one because I'm having so much fun. So this is the origin of light and fire. Lilouet. Raven and Seagull were friends. Their houses were close together in the Lilouet country. It was dark all over the world at this time because Seagull owned the daylight, which he kept in a box. He never let any of it out except for his own use. Raven said, "It isn't fair that Seagull should have all the daylight. Some people should have some of it." Therefore, Raven planned to get the daylight. One night, he placed thorn branches on the trail between Seagull's house and then the place where his canoe was fastened. Then he ran to Seagull, shouting, "Your canoe has gone adrift! Your canoe has gone adrift!" Seagull heard Raven and rushed out of the house in haste. He did not even put on his moccasins. He ran in his bare feet and stepped on the thorns. Then Seagull screamed, "Ah, ah!" just as the seagulls do now. He shouted to Raven, "Get my canoe! Save my canoe!" Then he went back to his house. He was much excited. Raven pulled up the canoe and went to the house. Gull spoke of those thorns in his feet. Raven said, "I can pull them out if you will let a little daylight out of your box." So Gull sat down beside the box and opened it with one hand. A little. Raven began to pull the thorns with an awl. Soon he said, "I can't see well. Give me more light." Gull opened the box a little more. Raven pulled out all the thorns but one. He said, "This last one is hard to get out. I shall need more light." When Gull opened the box a little more, Raven gave his arm a push. Thus he knocked down the box and broke it. Then all the daylight rolled out and spread all over the world. Seagull was unable to collect it again. Raven took out the last thorn and went home chuckling. Now Raven could see very well indeed, and one day he cleaned himself nicely. He combed his and oiled his hair and put on his best robe and painted his face black. Then he sat on top of his underground house and looked all over the world. He saw nothing. The third day, he changed the paint on his face. That evening, he saw signs of smoke. The fourth day, Raven changed his face paint again. Now he located the smoke. It was far away to the south, on the shore of the sea. Raven had 4 servants. They all at once entered a small canoe, but it was swamped. Then he tried another. Then he said to his wife, "Go to Seagull's house and tell him I need to borrow his canoe." So he started off in Seagull's canoe. Now they paddled downstream until they were close to the house of the people who owned the fire. They planned very quietly. That night they bored a hole under the wall, under where the baby board hung, and stole the baby. Now they ran away. Now early in the morning the people missed the baby. They knew what had happened, but Raven was too far ahead. They sent out men, sturgeon, whale, and seal, searched for Raven's boat, but they could not find him. Other men searched, but only one small fish found Raven's canoe. He tried to stop the runaways by sticking to the paddle, but after a while he got tired and went home. Now Raven reached his own country. Then the fire people visited Raven with presents. 4 times they came. Raven refused all their gifts. Then he said, "What do you wish?" Raven said, "Fire." And then he said, "Well, why didn't you say that before?" And they were glad, because they had plenty of fire and thought little of its value. So they brought Raven fire, and he gave them back their baby. These fire people showed Raven how to make fire with dry cottonwood roots. Raven said to the seagull, "If I had not got the light from you, I could not have seen where the fire was kept." Okay, have a good day.